Welcome, everyone, to Online Marketing Social Media 101, Making the Web Work for Your Business. My name is Chris Cohn. I'm Policy Manager with Efficiency First California, and I will be your moderator this morning on behalf of Build It Green and PG&E, which are sponsoring today's webinar. And so I can have one moment. Okay, great. So I would like to welcome those in our audience who are participating contractors in the Energy Upgrade California Home Upgrade Program. It is your work in the Home Upgrade and Advanced Home Upgrade programs that is delivering energy efficiency services to residents in the PG&E territory. As you can see on the slide, the Home Upgrade Program is administered by the Bay Area Regional Energy Network within the 9 Bay Area counties. And on behalf of PG&E, Build It Green administers the Home Upgrade Program in the rest of the PG&E territory. And I would also like to welcome today participating contractors in the AC Quality Care Program who have been providing HVAC quality care services to homeowners in the 9 Bay Area counties and PG&E territory. We're very happy to have you with us today. Our topic today is social media, and our presenter is Peter Trost. He's the founder and CEO of Energy Circle, which works with contractors, home performance contractors in 46 states to help their companies excel at marketing and business operations. Peter is expert in marketing of the home performance value proposition and is a leader in the use of social media to drive home performance lead generation. He's also been a featured speaker at many of our regular industry association meetings. We'll be hearing more from Peter very shortly. Today's event is a part of a broader training curriculum that is being hosted by PG&E, and you will find 2 new sales boot camps, in-person events coming up in January, so please be sure to put this on your calendar. These are with Mike Rogers, who is a consultant in the development of home performance business models. And he will be in California working one-on-one with boot camp participants on January 9th and 10th in Elk Grove, California, and then January 13th and 14th in San Ramon, California. And these are, there will be additional boot camps coming up in the coming months as well. So to find out more information about the boot camp events and how you can register, please contact the folks, the Build It Green folks on your screen as they relate to the program that you are participating in. And before we get started with today's presentation, I just would like to remind you that we will have a question and answer session at the end of Peter's presentation, and you are welcome to submit questions as the presentation is unfolding. There is on your GoToWebinar control panel a questions pane, and it is there that you can submit questions about the topic of the day, as well as any technical issues you might be having during our broadcast. We will use these questions in the Q&A session. There will also be a recording of the webinar and a PDF of the presentation slides available to all attendees afterwards. Also, you can collapse the control panel at any time for better viewing of the presentation slides by clicking on the red-white arrow button at the top of the pane. So a reminder, please feel free to submit your questions during the presentation via the questions pane. And now I would like to hand the presentation over to Peter Trost. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much, Chris, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I'm on the East Coast, and it's nice to be talking to California today. It was -7 when I woke up, and so I am longing for the days when I lived in the Bay Area. So it is winter here. Good for home performance. So And again, thanks to Bill DeGreen and PG&E for sponsoring this. I'm really glad to be able to do this. So let's go on to the next slide. Chris did the introduction of me, so I won't belabor that, other than just to emphasize the point that what I'll talk about today is, built on a number of years of working with home performance related contractors of essentially every business model. I know there's a lot of HVAC folks on this call. We work with HVAC companies who have made the transition to home performance, some who are thinking about making the transition. We work with shell-oriented companies that are, we work with pure energy auditors. Essentially, every business model that you could imagine in home performance, we probably have touched on, and done so in states like California, where there are strong programs, and in other states where there are none. So all of that forms the information that I'm presenting to you today, and we are able to look at the aggregate data pool of about 270 companies in the business across the country that gives us, I think, a really interesting data platform going forward. So next slide, please. Just one thing before I get going. We write a regular newsletter that we put out every week. It is comprised of a compilation of blog posts that we write on a regular basis, which are very much along the lines of what you'll hear me talk about today. The latest tips on marketing for home performance companies, the latest trends in Google and search and so forth. So if you're interested, that's all free, and you can sign up for that. So let's go to the next slide. So what I want to talk about today is 4 primary things, but I'm also quite flexible and be excited to have some discussion in the in the Q&A thing. So first and foremost, we'll talk about lead gen tactics, and particularly what I see that is working across the country. Second, we'll talk a little bit about search and this ever-changing world of search. Google is a constantly changing thing, and keeping up on that is vitally important. A piece of Google is the third part, which is Google Plus. Some of you may recall this used to be called Google Places. It's undergoing a massive amount of change, and associated with it is the major trend that I see coming forward in 2014, which is the importance of third-party reviews, with Google at the front of that list, but a number of other sites that we'll talk about as well. And then lastly, assuming we have time, we'll talk about some specific things about your website and ways to look at whether you're getting the performance you need out of it. So that's the plan. During the Q&A, I am more than happy to talk about any topic that comes up, from social media to Facebook to pay-per-click advertising, social advertising, essentially anything you see here, is fair game, and I love talking about it. So next slide. And I'll just pace through these quickly. All of us, I think, know that we live in a time of incredible change in the world of marketing, not just as it affects home performance, but generally. So next slide. Direct mail, which was once a staple of contracting business, is very difficult to make work, given that people's mailboxes look like this. Next, the advertising industry is not exactly known for its restraint, and so increasingly advertising is interruptive. It's sort of in our face, and it's increasingly, I think, ineffective, harder and harder to make it work when this kind of pop-up stuff comes in front of your face. Next. Once upon a time, call centers and telemarketing were a vital way to generate leads in our industry, and now 200 million people are on a do not call list. Next. Even some of the things that we consider to be brand new, Facebook, for example, people are starting to talk about peak Facebook. That there is, the tolerance for advertising inside of Facebook may have just hit its maximum, and that even that is in decline. Next. And lastly, of course, the oldest staple of our industry, which is Yellow Pages advertising, is increasingly in decline, and this is what it looks like. So next, so we face a very interesting time, both with all of the changes that are happening in marketing, but in addition to that, all of the changes that are happening in, this business we call, the big umbrella we call home performance. So obviously for those of you that come from a HVAC background and are making the move, this is a time of real change. So combining these two things, that our business models are changing alongside of this incredible upheaval in the world of marketing, makes things sort of challenging. And hopefully today we'll sort of demystify some of that. Next slide, please. I thought it would be good at the start to just give you my sense of, as we go into 2014, what I see as some of the mega trends that affect us. The first of those is that Google, which controls so much of our lives in terms of how we work online, is in a constant state of change. And so my quote-unquote weather report for the coming year is turbulence with a chance of megastorms. There's been a lot of upheaval in how Google affects local businesses, and increasingly vital to how you win in search and how you succeed in business, and that's probably going to stay that way. I think in California in particular, I call it the solar train rides on, and the relevance to us, whether we're in solar or not in solar, is that the success of the big solar companies, and leasing in particular, means that the mindset of the typical homeowner around home energy is very much driven by the concept of, I can get these panels on my roof for essentially no cost. And I think that becomes increasingly the entry point. Third-party reviews, we're going to talk more about, are increasingly important. This is led by Google, but not exclusively. Yelp is really making a major play in service industries in California in particular, so I'm sure all of you know that, and we'll talk more about it. The good news is that all of these social platforms, although they are, there is that peak issue with Facebook, is that there are a growing number of really interesting and extremely targetable and targeted advertising products through the social media platforms that can be very effective and very inexpensive because they are so hyper-targeted. And then lastly, the general category of local businesses across the entire globe, frankly, is a very hot space, meaning that there's a lot of attention going into companies are looking at ways to deliver more products that can be used by businesses that are local, which we obviously all are. And so there's a lot of good news. The bad news is I'm sure all of you have gotten calls from various entities that promise to bring get you to page 1 on Google and all this stuff, and so there's a lot of sleaze out there. So, but those are my big picture trends. Next slide, please. So home performance marketing has a number of challenges, and led first and foremost by the fact that people aren't really buying home performance, right? We know that the idea of home performance is a great kitchen table selling concept, but there isn't a lot of demand for it up front, and that impacts everything that we think about and we'll talk more about. So next slide. In particular, I think that in the old days, as we said, it used to be that we could rely on one or two major initiatives in our marketing mix that would drive, in this case, this is showing about 75% of the leads in this particular example. So two things, in this case, Yellow Pages and direct mail, back in the day, might have kind of carried the weight of your lead generation program. Next slide. The challenge today is that there is no longer kind of one or two silver bullets that can do that. Now, obviously, if you're in HVAC and you have an established customer base and you can approach this home performance opportunity as an upsell to your existing customer base, that's probably going to be a bigger slice of pie than what's going on here. This data that we're looking at is a company that gave me permission to show it. That's about a $1.75 million home performance company doing air sealing, insulation, very high quality work, and this is the real data from a year's worth of their activity, and you'll see that there's no single slice of pie here, any one specific tactic that adds up to more than 16% of their leads. So pretty challenging in that you've got to have your fingers in a lot of pots, and you need to make sure that all this stuff is working. So next slide. I won't go into full detail about all of this, but I do want to make the point that not all successful marketing is necessarily new or online or related to the internet. And so I look at the three categories of kind of what I describe as old and dying, and this is not ever going to be uniformly true, right? Yellow Pages might be working for some people if your target audience is older, if you're in a place where the Yellow Pages still have some cachet, if you're the last person standing, right? So none of this is ever kind of exactly universal, but print is increasingly hard, TV is hard, and for the most part the things in this old and dying category are there because their prices remain very high, and yet their effectiveness is in decline. It's important to say that there are some old school tactics that I still very much believe in as part of a good home performance marketing program, and that's the middle column here. So, word of mouth has always been our best marketing tactic and always will be, doing a great job with your vehicles. I think door hangers work, and in some cases home shows are working. So there are many things that are not very techy at all, still very, very important and still very effective. In the new and thriving category, a few highlights here. I think this idea of active referrals, which is getting word of mouth to get beyond two people talking across the fence in a neighborhood about what a fantastic job you did. It's really about getting those referrals to be more active, asking for referrals. Obviously your website, which we're going to talk more about, is critically important. Organic search, we're going to spend some time on, is very, very important. And then there's this whole range of different types of online advertising that's out there now, from Google AdWords, otherwise known as pay-per-click, to retargeting and various other things. I also think, by the way, that email and newsletters, very inexpensive, obviously, once you've got a list set up. So that's the sort of my picture of the landscape as a whole. Next slide, please. What is, on one hand, you can look at that list and say, pretty intimidating to try to be good at all of those things. On the other hand, there is some good news, and that is that the old and dying stuff tends to be much higher commitment, meaning that those things typically require a minimum contract of 6 or 12 months, so you're locked in whether it's working or not, and they tend to be fairly high cost, so therefore they're high risk. In the right-hand column, the commitment level is fairly low. If you want to try Google AdWords and give it a whirl for a period of time and see if it's working, you probably put at risk a couple of months of budget to make that work, and you'll find out real quickly, is it working or is it not working? And that's pretty true of almost everything in this, so that the key point is that the commitment level is much lower, the risk level is much lower, and as long as you are on your game, which we're going to talk about next, in terms of measuring success, you shouldn't burn, you shouldn't worry about burning away a big bunch of your marketing budget on something that's not working. So let's go to the next slide. A couple things I just wanted to throw in here in terms of how do you then start sifting through all these opportunities to pick and choose what you want to do, and focus on the blue lines in this on this chart. This is Forrester research from earlier this year about consumer trust in different types of advertising. We don't need to go through all of this, but just look at the top of the list, the things that have the greatest trust. The blue line is the U.S. Brand or product recommendations, professionally written reviews, and consumer written reviews, and then natural search results. So this is a very, very important driver that increasingly it is that word of mouth that we've always relied on, but now word of mouth is on steroids because of the growth of this online review system that is out there. And so these are the kinds of things that are most important. And if you go down to the bottom, advertising, although I'm an advocate of it, is not trusted as well. So that's an important piece. Next slide. So what I want to dive into now is, of course, what's obvious, I think, but the idea that all advertising tactics are not equal, or marketing tactics are not equal, and I won't spend a lot of time, next slide please, on a spreadsheet in a presentation. I'll apologize in advance for this, but I just do want to make the point about how we need to be measuring our marketing efforts. And this again is the same company we talked about $1.75 million in sales, about $7,500 average job size. So a fairly typical company, I think, in home performances, and not a mechanical company. This is primarily a shell company. But let's just dive in the next slide and just want to look at the math that we're talking about here. And what we're really trying to make sure we're focused on is cost per acquisition. And what we mean by that is the total cost of a job. Right, not a lead, but a job. And so working your way across, if the tactic I chose to highlight here is organic web, so you put some money into content and some search engine optimization and stuff to make sure that your website is performing. Of 15,000 visits, you get a conversion rate of 1%, meaning that 150 leads are generated by that particular tactic, just routine organic visits to your website. If you convert those to quotes at a rate of 25%, that's 38 quotes. If you convert your quotes at 75% to jobs, that results in 28 jobs, and you can calculate, therefore, the cost per acquisition, in this case, of $107. So pretty good, well, in that case, it's a pretty good number. So that's the math. Next slide. And what it does then is gives you the ability to look across your entire marketing mix and make some decisions about what's working and what's not. In this particular case, the average for this company came out to $293, which is a good number, by the way. I mean, that for a company at this sales volume for job sizes of $7,500, that's a good number. But if we go to the next slide, Chris, when I rank order these, and you start looking at, what is below the average, so it's sort of between, directories and direct mail, that we start to cross over into the tactics that have a cost per acquisition that is north of the average. You can start asking yourself whether direct mail and public relations and print and home shows and lead gen are working. And of course, I think what all of us instinctively know is that that idea of marketing being integrated works, right? So marketing all taken in together is part of how marketing works, and that's one of the hardest things to actually measure, is that interrelationship of, I met you at the home show, I then saw one of your ads, and then I happened to see your truck, and then I called you. So that's very hard, so we kind of have to have a gut sense or an instinctive sense of how that works. But if we're doing this level of measurement, we should then be able to say, look, maybe, we really got to think hard about that home show, because it's very costly and we can't really attribute any specific leads to it. So more on that, and this is a spreadsheet that I'm happy to make available to folks if they wanted to to take a look at it. So let's go on to the next slide. So, in addition to looking hardcore at the numbers, there's some other factors to think about when you evaluate what marketing options are available to you. Obviously, in your market, in the specific geography that you're working in, you'll have to look at what's available. Sometimes, there can be a fantastic community weekly that's driven right to the kind of audience you want to be talking to, and that could be great. So check out what's available. Obviously, we just talked about effectiveness, from an ROI standpoint, but also how much do you have to spend, right? So what is the budget, and then how do you kind of carve that out in a way that's going to be most effective? I think it's very important to think about the resources you have to execute, because increasingly the kinds of things we're doing around content that is working and various activities like that are not necessarily things you can outsource. They require somebody on your team to do it. So who do you have? How much of your own time? Are you mature enough for the company to have someone who's at least got part of their day dedicated to marketing? And at that point, then you can consider various options for outsourcing. I think one of the things that's most important to think about in all of this is sustainability, and that is what can you keep up with? If, for example, you buy the notion that content is increasingly important for the search engines and you adopt a blog, are you capable of keeping up the pace of publishing of that blog? So many of us, and me included, New Year's resolution, I'm going to be a better writer this year, and, I get off to great guns and then I fall off. And so, thinking through that kind of sustainability piece is very important. And then lastly, I think is do you like it? And this, I think, is especially true around social media. If, although I'm an advocate of being present in social media and on Facebook, at the end of the day, if you are a Facebook hater, you will not succeed in Facebook no matter what happens. When companies that are doing well in our business in Facebook are doing so because somebody on the team raised their hand and said, this is something I want to do. I really like Facebook, and those are the kinds of companies that are succeeding with that. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, and I think, Chris, we're going to stick in a little poll question here. So I just wanted to ask the question, are you measuring your marketing campaigns, based on this idea that I just talked about, which is on a cost per acquisition basis? Are you able to get the math all the way through? I don't think I can see the percentage voting. Maybe, Chris, I don't know if you want to just give me a heads up. All right, 78% say no, and 22% say yes. So I realize, by the way, that that's not super easy to do, although it is very true that a lot of the new methodologies sort of automatically do that math for you. So that's something that's to be thought about. So let's go on, and I just want to talk a little bit about web search as a starting point, because this is so important. And there's a lot of people in our industry that are invested in trying to make this seem a lot more complicated than it should be. But it really doesn't have to be. So next slide. Winning in web search is really a combination of three things. You can think of it as like a three-legged stool. First is context. Second is authority. And the third is social signals. So next slide. What we mean by this is context is really related to content. If I am searching for air conditioning, Pleasanton, California, if I don't have content on my website that is about air conditioning, Pleasanton, California, then there is no chance of winning that search. First and foremost, you have to have that matchup on context. Secondly, authority refers to the complicated measure by which a search engine looks at your website and says this is a good quality, authoritative, trusted website. And for the most part, the biggest single factor continues to be the number of links that are coming into your website from other sites. So essentially, the link being a sort of a form of a vote in your favor. The more links, the more high-quality links coming into you, the more likely it is that the search engines will think of your site as authoritative, and therefore a good thing to move up in the ranks. And the third leg of the stool, which is relatively new, which is why we put it in a different color, is social signals, and meaning the presence of your company name throughout the whole social media sphere. And so, and this is frankly one of the ways that they look and say, are you a real company? Are you legit? Are you engaged in your community? Because lots of presence throughout the social media sphere is an indicator to the search engines that that's the case. So I hope that sort of makes some sense and is simplified, but let's quickly walk through, next slide, what we mean by search. And I chose Seattle in this case just so I wouldn't make anybody in California upset. But, this is a typical search for insulation contractor, in this case Seattle. So next slide. So the first thing you notice, and I think many of us know this, I just want to make sure we're all clear. At the very top, the first 3 listings and then the entire right-hand column, this is paid search. These are Google AdWords. You have to pay on a per-click basis to be here, and the person who is bidding the highest for the click will get the highest position. So the one at the very top here, Red National, is bidding the most for this. So that's paid search. Next slide. This next section is what we call organic, meaning there's nothing being paid here. This is the search engine determining that these are the best results for this particular search term. And one of the things that I would just point out, you'll notice that there are 3 listings, and then there are these blended listings for local businesses. We'll talk more about those in a second. One of the things that's increasingly the case is what you're seeing here, which is that Google is very much favoring directories. In this case, you'll see the first one is the Better Business Bureau, the second one is Yelp, and the third one is Angie's List. And this is infuriating in a lot of ways to me, but it is kind of the reality of what's going on, and part of the case we'll talk about in a bit about why reviews are so important. So not impossible for you as a company to get into that top 3, but not easy because of how much priority Google is giving those directories. Next slide. This 2 sections right down below, we'll look at this again, and the map at the top are what we call local. And what this means is that the search term, in this case insulation contractor, is determined by the search engine to be a local search. So therefore, Google has turned on what is called the local algorithm and has produced this, what is typically a 7-pin listing. And next slide, please. So if we sort of focus in on that particular listing, what this is, in the case of the top one, Arrow Insulation, is that's their website, where you see the star listing and then the 9 reviews. Those are links that go to the information that is coming out of their Google Plus page. And so this is one of the cases we'll talk about for why reviews are so increasingly important. The presence here, you look down that list and you see 2 companies who have more than 5 reviews. That's the threshold for the stars to appear. So, and it's, very clear both visually and I think in terms of what a consumer is looking for, that those are the ones that, the eye is attracted to. If you've got somebody who's got 9 reviews and a 4.7, that's a lot better than somebody who's got 2 reviews and nothing showing. So it's to win in this search, though, we'll talk more about it, you have to have both an optimized Google Plus page as well as an optimized primary site. Next. The other kind of search that we're, very interested in here is what we call brand search, meaning that, you've done a good job in your marketing, or, people saw your truck and they searched for your company name, and this is what a listing, would look like. And if you're doing well, you'll get the primary listing. Actually, go to the next slide. That primary result in the, in the upper left, where you've got site links, where you see contact, careers, etc., deeper dives down into your site. And that's, you'll notice that Google's pulling the reviews over into the primary listing. So again, making the case of how important that is. But next slide, 100% of what you see on the right-hand side is coming out of Google+, right? So all of that data is coming out of your Google Plus page. And so we're going to talk more about that in a second, but one of the things that's very critical about this is it isn't so much the Google Plus page as much as the data on that page, because Google is transmitting that information through a lot of different locations, and this is a great example of that. All right, let's go on to the next slide, and I want to talk a little bit about that that first leg of the stool, the content piece, which is, is your content on your site matching what people are searching for? And, this is where things get particularly challenging in our industry. Next slide. When I do this in person, I like to give people a chance to sort of vote for what they think. But the key point here is that the search volume, and what we're looking at here are monthly United States, monthly searches for these search terms in the United States. And, it's probably not much of a surprise to us that solar, is as dominant a term as it is. But I put this up here relative to home performance, which is kind of how we define our industry, which again is not something around which there is a lot of demand, and that's very, it's very important to, to know that efficiency has some pretty good volume, home energy has some pretty good volume, but solar is quite dominant. Next slide, please, Chris. We have this phase of the work that we typically do, this diagnostic phase. I know in California there's a strong push to call it an assessment, or an audit. And again, I'm reminding you that this is United States data. But just important to look at some of the subtleties of this information. The distinction between audit and assessment, at least on a global level. That could be different locally in California because you've been pushing the concept of assessment, but I still think audit is really the term. But the subtle distinctions between auditing and auditor and audit that are significant differences in volume and therefore could make significant differences in how much traffic you get from those search terms. Next one, please. One of the the biggest challenges we have as an industry is that there isn't a name for the work that we do. We like to call it home performance. Sometimes we call it weatherization. Sometimes it's energy retrofit. But you'll notice that none of the terms add up to even as much volume as happens around the term energy audit. So it's it's very this is an industry-wide challenge that we all face. Next slide, please. So when you look across all this stuff, what is true is that the insulation and heating and air conditioning terms tend to be the ones that have the most volume relative to the kinds of things that we talk about them. And that's just because, as all of us I think know, people are not particularly well informed about this, homeowners aren't, and when they go to search for something related to their home, they are typically looking for that service. They've self-diagnosed that my air conditioner needs replacement or needs to be upsized or I don't have enough insulation. So it really is about the specific services that make up the totality of what all of us know to be home performance that is the important thing. And one more slide on these volumes. It's also important to know that even within the category, and insulation is the best example. There is lots of volume and lots of different volume depending on what type of insulation we're talking about. So, spray foam insulation tends to have a lot of volume for reasons that aren't totally clear to me, but it's just it's the hot product. And you get a sense here that there is people search for materials. They search for rooms of the house, like attic insulation, and in some cases they're searching for the service called insulation contractor. So I'm going to stop, there on the volumes. I guess the key point here is that it's important to know this stuff, and if we have time in the Q&A, I can show you some tools that you can use to go look this stuff up, but very important to make sure that you're focused on that. So let's go to the next section, and I want to talk more about this. What I've been saying is around local and how important this is and kind of what a major trend it is going forward in the next year. Next slide, please. 20% of all searches in Google are local searches, meaning that they are detected to be a search for a local service. And pretty much everything that is related to our industry, whether it's insulation or air conditioning or energy audit, the full range of terms have all been localized. They're all resulting in that. Next slide. So just as a reminder, almost always when there is a search term in our industry, you're going to get this local result, the kind that have those 7, it's often 7 of those pin listings, and very often ranking there is what is going to be the most important thing and the highest ranking you're likely to get. You can get both. You can get both an organic and a local. It's not easy, but if you're good, you can. So winning here is dependent on being successful with your Google Plus page. Next slide. Now, Google has made this about as confusing as it could possibly be. So many of you know that there was this thing called Google Places that morphed into Google Plus Local. And what that is basically it's that pin result in those pin results. It's very important for your organic ranking. It is a source of what we believe are the most critical online reviews going forward into 2014. You may have a Google Plus page that has been set up for you by Google even if you haven't gone and claimed it. So it can be out there and people can be commenting on it and writing reviews even if it's not there. Generally speaking, it's fairly low maintenance, and I think gives you a real competitive advantage if you can jump on it, because our industry tends not to be really on the bleeding edge of this particular issue. Now, on the right-hand side of this slide is what is a Google Plus business page, and that's more analogous to a Facebook page. And what's happening, and it may have happened to you already, it's in process as we speak, is that these two things are being merged. And so the distinction is that the Google Plus business page has social components to it. It has a place where you can put posts, you can create essentially friends or associated people through what they call circles. It's fairly easy to set up. Google Plus is a bit of a ghost town, but so you don't need to expect a lot of engagement, but one of the things about it is that when you post in there and link back to your site, the search juice is very high. Google has it turned up very high. So again, chances are you may have a Google Plus page from the Google Plus's Google Local, and so let's go next to the next slide and do another poll, which is, have you claimed your page? This is you'll have typically to have claimed it, you will have had to go through a verification procedure and got the postcard back from Google, and then once you do that, you have control over it. So let's see. All right, so about 71% say no. So for those of you who said no, I would encourage you strongly to go search for that page, see if you have one or not, and then begin the process of verification. You'll see a very clear button on that page that says, is this your business? And then you can kind of manage it from there. But that's pretty interesting and very, very important going forward. You may find you've got reviews there and no way to really know. So let's go on. Just a couple things about the page. This is what a Google Plus Local page looks like. Over the course of the last literally 2 weeks, they've been doing some changes to the design. But I would just emphasize the fact that you'll see front and center in the middle column there is where the review summary is. So this business doesn't have any, but that's an important part. And then next slide. When you get that merged page, here's Dan Thompson, who I'm going to use as an example a couple times today, down in Los Angeles. You'll notice that in his case, he does have, he's met the review threshold. He's got a review summary of 4.9, and I think you'd argue that that's a pretty prominent listing. So, and you'll notice at the very top of the page, it's kind of small letters, but you see about and posts and photos and YouTube, and so that's the indication that you have the merged page and you have those other things. So that's what the two look like. And again, next up, I just want to go back and just re-emphasize the point that it's less about that page and more about the data that's coming out of that page. So this is that search we looked at before where the entire right-hand side of this search result for a particular company name is all coming from Google, and then the star rating that you see as part of his organic listing, the 4.9 and the 5 stars, is all coming out of there. So the information in that page in many ways is more important than the page itself, but it's really, really important to take that on. Next up, please. Just want to emphasize reviews. I'll talk a bit more about them in a second, but this is where those reviews are. Very frustrating to get people to write reviews in Google because they have to be a Google Plus member. So the best practice here seems to be look for people who have a Google Plus address, a Gmail address, and then that's a good person to target to request a review on Google, and I'll talk a bit more about that. So let's click a little bit faster, Chris. I'll go to the next slide after that. The one additional thing that I want to emphasize here is the importance of the categories you put yourself into in Google. And this, when they made the changes, it used to be that you could freelance a little bit. You could define your own category and say, for example, energy audit. Today, they have restricted it to only the things that Google has within their database. And so, but very, very important, this categorization information here, again, goes not just to, is a very important part of how Google looks at your business. So on the next slide, we've gone through and sort of researched the categories that are most relevant to our industry, and you can kind of get a sense here. You can search when you go to do it. Insulation contractor is there. Obviously, air conditioning contractor and repair service are both there. HVAC contractor is there. I would emphasize that HVAC is a commercial term. It's not something that consumers really focus on, but you get 10 of these, and so the best practice is to use as many of them as possible that are truly relevant to your business. Don't claim something you really don't do. That's the thing. So very important to get those categories right. All right. Next slide. And then the last piece is that there's a piece in there for a description of your company. Very important to fill that in, to use good keywords, in there. Don't overstuff them, but you'll notice that you can put in links, and so you can create a couple of links. If you say, for example, we offer complete HVAC services or complete heating and air conditioning services, that would be a terrific link to your website, as well as full, energy audits and home performance. You can create links, and so that's something really good to do. All right. I want to talk now, and I'm going to speed up a little bit because I'm a bit behind where I wanted to be on this new world of kind of reviews. And let's go to the next slide. There's a number of studies that show that the reviews are important on many levels, but are very important from the standpoint of ranking. This is the local search ranking report that comes out every year, and the two slices of pie, both the 19.6 that is your place page, the Google Plus page we're just talking about, as well as the number of reviews, are increasingly large factors in how you are overall going to rank. And so reviews are really, really important next up to search. Now, they're also really important to people. If you just look for a second at the right-hand side of this, the growth in the number of people, this is a study done over the last 3 years across the United States, how do online reviews influence your decision, that more than 60%, in 2013 are saying that positive customer reviews make me more likely to use a local business. So very, very important. Next slide. For us as contractors, of course, we're not included. Our specific category isn't included. But if you look at tradesmen and builders and roofers, we are definitely at the side of this graph towards the left where reputation matters the most. People are actively searching for third-party reviews when choosing contractors. So it's especially important for us. Next one. And then one more piece of data here, which is that this is a trend line from a long time ago, 2005, in terms of the number of times people actually type into the search engine contractor reviews. And so you'll notice that the trend line is definitely on a completely upward. So I think that the implication here is that people are looking for your reviews before they're actually even looking for you. So that's really, really important. So next slide. In terms of priorities, in my humble opinion, the first and foremost is Google, because of the cloud of Google, because of those ranking factors, and because of the presence in search. So I really, and as I said, that star rating that we've been talking about will show up after 5 reviews. Very important that that's, that you focus on that. Secondly, Angie's List and Yelp, and I think those of you in California kind of know this inherently, but it's not necessarily true across the country, is that Yelp is making a very big play into service businesses. It's not just for restaurants anymore, and is an increasingly important, high-ranking in search, as well as an important source of traffic coming through. So both Angie's List, I think, and Yelp are very important. And then what I put third on the list is City Search, which sounds a little obscure, but the reason that's on the list as third is that it is a feeder for about 15 other sites. So if you get reviews on City Search, they will populate into other locations. Next slide. You should choose your priorities based on kind of what you see going on in your own market. And I just, like I said, I happen to know that Yelp is really becoming a major player in search. But if you were to do a search such as insulation contractor, Oakland, let's say, take a look at what is coming up high in search. If you see Yelp, high up, as it is in this particular case in Seattle, if you see Angie's List high up, that's your signal that says we better focus on reviews there. Next slide, please. So let's just talk about where you stand today in terms of your reviews. How many do you have today? None, 1 to 3, 3 to 10, more than 10, or a perfectly good answer, which is you're not sure. That was fast. Oh, good. So that's pretty impressive. I mean, I think that 50% of you have more than 10 reviews out there. 13% in 3 to 10, and then 25% in none. So not bad, but I'm hoping that you'll put some effort into it. If we go to the next slide, there is good news, which is that part of what, and this literally was announced 2 weeks ago. So as part of the dashboard for your Google Plus page, or in this case they still call it the Places for Business thing, Google added a new dashboard for reviews. And so you can see in this first tab is that Google will look across the entire web, both on its properties, the Google Plus, as well as across the web, and identify all of your reviews. And so you can see them all in one place, and you'll notice, if you can see here, you can view and reply directly from this dashboard. If you go to the next slide, they give you really good analytics. So the first little tab there, 14 total reviews, where they're spread out, Google, Better Business Bureau, etc., and then a comprehensive average rating on the 5 scale of where all of them come from. So this is brand new. It's free as soon as you get that Google Places page claimed and set up, and it becomes your central source for information. All right, so let's go to the next section, and then Chris, I know I'm a little behind with time you wanted me to be on, but I think I can get there, in reasonable time. So the next section I want to talk a little bit about is your website, and what we look at in terms of the definition of is it performing for you? And so, next slide, please. Performance on the web can be a number of different factors. If you could go to the next slide. But for the most part, I'm not so concerned about how it looks. At the end of the day, design I think is an important part of the site as long as it is affecting things. But really, we look at design. We look at usability. Are people able to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish on your site? Is it structured well so that search engines like it and people like it from the ability to find their way around? Is the navigation clear? That's a key part of the user interface. Speed is an increasingly important thing. But what I think is really, to me, far and away the most important things to be looking at on your site are conversion, meaning the percentage of people who come to your site that convert in some fashion to a lead, right? When people visit your website, you can tell where they came from by IP address. You can see a lot of data, but you don't know who they are. Conversion is they left you a name or they called you. And that's increasingly driven by the content on your website and by search engine optimization, which we talked a little bit about before. So, next slide. Three things I wanted to just touch briefly on here as we come to the close and then get to the Q&A. One is your call to action. Two is your About Us page, and I'm sorry for the sort of colorful language here, but it's very, very important. We'll talk about it in a sec to make sure that that page is good. And then the content about your services. If you think back on those graph slides where we were looking at how much volume there is for various things, winning in search is really about having good pages about your services that over time start to rank. So next slide, please. So I thought we'd do a quick one last poll and talk, a little bit about how often are you updating your site? Do you update it on once a month, once a week? Are you daily? Maybe you don't have a site yet, or which is not atypical, is that you got the thing launched and it's difficult to get in there and make changes, so it ends up being rarely. So that's pretty typical. The fact that about 63% of you rarely are able to make changes to your site, and this is a frustration and also a big challenge because it is increasingly important to the search engines that the content on your site be fresh. Remember that middle leg of the stool that I talked about in terms of web authority. One of the additional factors, in addition to links, that goes into that whole calculus is how fresh is your website. If it's stale, and then this is so typical, right? It was a big effort to get your site launched. You put a lot of effort into it, breathed a big sigh of relief once the thing got up and live, and then it hasn't been touched for a long time. That is totally understandable and, unfortunately, a real negative with respect to how you would rank so far. So, and by the way, I think for those of you who are in the once-a-month category, remember what I said previously about kind of sustainability of your marketing effort? That applies in spades when we're talking about managing your website. An even, steady pace. If the realistic ability is for you to change your website once a month or add a piece of content or a new service or maybe write a blog post or whatever, if it's once a month, that's fine. Try to do it at an even, sustainable level. All right, let's go to the next question. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of a call to action, right? And a call to action is really the means by which we convert traffic into a lead. A call to action is an invitation. We'll look at a couple in just a minute. Typically, that drives us to a landing page and or a call tracking number. And we're big advocates of using call tracking because even from the most online sources of advertising, such as pay-per-click, we're finding that most people in our industry tend to use the telephone. Between 2/3 and 3/4 of all leads come via the telephone, and unless, even for companies that are really good at capturing those calls on an incoming basis and recording what the source is. There is no substitute for the kind of granularity that you can get out of both landing pages and call tracking numbers. But at that point, only at that point, do you have a conversion. You've got traffic has turned into an actual name. So that's what we mean by a call to action. Next slide, please. So I'm using Dan's Thompson. Many of you know. I believe he won an award last week. I jokingly told him it was for the best dressed home performance contractor, but I think it was something different than that. In his case, on his site, you'll see his call to action is right there in the upper right section of his website. Very prominent place. Next slide. And if you take a look at it, this is a little bit old back in the day when Energy Upgrade California had money, but or more than today. But you look at a call to action that's typically made up of these four elements: some value statement, obviously, and if you've got a big rebate, use that information. A certain relevance factor, obviously, using the Energy Upgrade program as kind of part of that overall thing, I think is very helpful in California. A specific offer, and so we'll talk more about this in a second, but something that is has value to the consumer, does not feel intimidating like I'm going to get, a salesperson's hands wrapped around my neck, but that gives them some value that is causes them to be interested in taking action. And then lastly, the action itself. And, as much as I sort of hate to admit it, the reason that, late night television, is constantly saying call now, click here, these things work. It's not the greatest statement ever about the human race, but the truth of the matter is the data shows that when you tell people what to do, the performance of those things works better. So click here. Now, next slide, please. So what I would ask, as you think about your specific call to action is what can you do to differentiate yourself? Because it's so typical across our industries to do this, which is we offer free estimates, right? And so everybody, if everybody offers a free estimate, there's nothing really distinctive there that's going to help you stand out. Next, please. I'm not saying that these are necessarily right for you, but trying to do something that is a bit more provocative and interesting is your home a Hummer or a Prius? If you're in the Bay Area, Berkeley, Oakland, that probably plays pretty well to that audience. Maybe in the Central Valley, not so much. We guarantee real savings, so that's pretty attractive, right? That's saying something that is quite a bit different. Learn how, this was a Connecticut program, $75 gets you $800 in service, something very provocative and seeming like, of high value. So, and you'll notice, here, in most cases, we're really, emphasizing, click here, contact us today, click here, just leave nothing to chance in terms of the action of that. So think about your call to action. Next slide, please. CTAs, calls to action, belong everywhere, right? Not just on your website, but everywhere. In your email newsletter, in your email signature, on brochures, trucks, in advertising. If you can get a consistent, imagine if you had a really terrific call to action that you really liked, those things belong everywhere. And I think the truth is that most of us are going to take a call, a lead call, and do some level of qualification of that lead. We're going to ask them what their energy bills are, what they're worried about, kind of house they live in, the reasons why they're calling. And chances are you're going to give a lot of information to that person in the course of that call. Is that a lead intake, or is that perhaps a free phone consultation? That's taking sort of what's happening routinely and potentially elevating it up to something that has a little bit more value. So calls to action belong everywhere. Let's just skip over the next slide quickly, Chris. and go to the next one. I made the point that the About Us page is important, and so one of the things we get to see across the data for this whole system is where the traffic goes. And really, from the home page, the traffic typically goes to one of two specific pages, either your About Us page, however you title that, or your services. About 70% of the traffic goes to those two pages, and they each vie for which one is more important. And I think this is understandable, right? When someone is looking at our kinds of businesses, there's really two things going on in their heads. One is, what do you offer the service that I think I need? And secondly, who are you? And so one of the things that we see in addition to this data is a lot of abandonment when they get to an About Us page that isn't good, right? So that becomes a leaky point of your website if it's not good. Next one, please. So I think, I chose somebody in New York State that I think has a nice, page, and we'll talk a little bit about this. But I think it's really important to, to make sure that there's a genuineness factor to your About Us page. One of the things that is, often hard for all of us is to have original photography on our website. So sometimes we'll get to an About Us page and see some generic stock photo image of some guy in a yellow hard hat, and and it's obvious to the viewer that's not really you, that's just an image, right? And so I think in this case, this is Ithaca, New York, sort of college town, so probably analogous to it's the upstate version of Berkeley or something where Cornell is. They've got a nice photograph of who they are. They're real clear about the About Us. They lead with, we're environmentalists, gardeners, and ecologists, et cetera. They've got real clear with, a very important mission statement front and center. And so again, I'm not saying that this is right for you, but I'm saying there's a genuineness to this that is, I think, a really good quality. Next slide. So a good About Us page, I think, has real photos, I think is personal, shares your business philosophy. Obviously, you wouldn't be on this call if you weren't committed to a certain form of how you were doing business that is a little bit different than a lot of contractors in the world. And so, stating that, a somewhat missionary component to why you're doing this energy efficiency work. Make sure to show off your credentials. The data says that nobody knows, the typical homeowner doesn't know what BPI means, but the presence of a authoritative trust symbol like BPI makes a big difference. And I think anything you can do to show your level of commitment in the community, I think is very, very helpful. Again, we're all local, all of this is local, and so that's, that can be very effective. All right. So, Chris, I'm almost done. Do you want me, I'm just going to let you cue me here in terms of whether I should go through this last section or whether you want to cut to the Q&A now. If I'm taking it, you want me to keep going. So,
can you unmute me?
Okay, well, that's good.
Peter, yes, please go ahead.
Okay, great. I'll just a few more slides here. The last thing I wanted to just mention was just about content, and again, just circling back on that notion of the three-legged stool. The first, priority, the first component of winning in search is site content. And so, next slide. The most important content on your site is really that content about services, because A, that is what matches up with what most of the search volume is looking for. I'm looking for an air conditioning contractor. I'm looking for heating repair. I'm looking for an energy audit. So making sure that that services content is on your site and really strong. So, just all of you get a sense here of what it is. So getting found, is very important to have that content. Next slide. This is, a one way to think about how having a clear logical structure for your services serves not only your audience, the real human beings that are consuming this content, but it also serves the search engines. And so what we're really looking for is something like this, which would say, we have a variety of insulation services, of which we have air sealing, fiberglass insulation, spray foam insulation, cellulose insulation. All of those are kind of components. They all kind of roll up to that page. And if we go to the next slide, it's very important to make sure that you have a clear linking structure. So insulation services is probably the page that is most likely to win if the search term was insulation Richmond, right? So that's what's likely to win there. But if the search term is spray foam Richmond, chances are that spray foam page is gonna win. The linking structure inside your site this doesn't have to be that complicated. Think of it as a way to signal to the search engine that the page that I am pointing all these links to inside your site is the important page on my site. So the more links you have pointing to particular pages, the more that's a signal to the search engine that, okay, that's an important page, and we need to sort of look at that. So this kind of a straightforward, simple, logical outline type structure for your content can be very, very helpful. And of course, it may be that to be a good example here is it may be your insulation services start off as a single page, right? You might have all 4 of these on one page called insulation services. At some point, when the content about spray foam or the importance of spray foam to your business gets to a certain level, then you break that out as its own page and then link back up. So hopefully that's clear. And let's go to the next slide. And I think we're actually just a few things here that I'll just pace through real quickly. That these are the tools that you can use to do some of that keyword research in Google. The Google AdWords Planner. Next page. Google Trends, which is kind of where you can see, and Google Trends is one of the few tools where you can actually get more granular about your geography. So you'll notice in this particular case it says, energy audit for New York. In this case you can get more granular, but it's more relative kinds of information. And then lastly, this is also another way that Google Trends does is you can use Google Trends to compare different terms. So you get a sense here. This was a comparison of insulation installer versus how to insulate, and with the red being how to insulate being quite a bit more higher. And of course, you'll notice obviously seasonality to that and so forth. So those are just a few of those tools that are there. So, and one more, this seems kind of obvious, but as all of us know, when you type into the search engine and you start a term such as home cooling, Google gives you Google Suggest. So, and that's a rank order of what is highest. So, you type home cooling systems, options, fans, tips, etc. And so, or down below, air conditioning units, repair, service, systems, etc. So that's another indicator of kind of where that volume is. So I think that's what I had to say. I'm hoping we'll get some questions, maybe some comments. I welcome you to tell me I'm all wet if there's anything that I said that you disagree with. But love to hear what all of you are thinking, and if you have any, specific questions. And again, I'm happy to talk about virtually anything that is related to home performance and marketing and almost anything else on top of that.
Thank you, Peter, and we do have some questions in the pipeline for you. First off, question is about when we're talking about social media tools as being low cost, does that include the staff time that is required to implement them?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think I would answer it this way. I think the best approach to social media is via somebody who's on your staff. I think that the reason I've come to that conclusion is that it is there is a genuineness factor in social media that you can kind of smell a mile away. There's a certain kind of personal aspect to it and a genuineness to it that really demands that someone be close. I'm not, even though we will do it on behalf of some of our clients, I'm not a big fan of it because I really want that to be local. The cost, I think, has everything to do with the how savvy that particular person is that you have running it is with the medium. So I think all of us know that, this new generation that grew up with this stuff as part of their, normal routine in life does social media kind of in their sleep. And so the best examples that I use, I showed, for example, the Snug Planet example. They are probably one of my poster children for doing a great job with social media. There's one guy on their staff. He's an auditor. He raised his hand and said, I want to do this. And it's just become a routine part of his day. And frankly, I don't even think it's so routine that I don't think he even measures his time. So that commitment of time and investment really has everything to do with who the person is and how facile they are in the social media realms. It can be, over time, and I know as an owner of the company, you have to have a certain amount of faith and trust that somebody's going to, you got to let somebody go. I don't recommend, it doesn't work if it's like every blog post or every Facebook post or every tweet has to get approved or something. That's slowing the pace down. But when it's somebody who really likes it, it becomes so routine that it's almost immeasurable in terms of how much time it really takes.
Thank you. Another question on a different topic is reviews are very important now, but how do you handle it if you get a blah or bad review? Can you take down those types of reviews?
Well, it's an excellent question. And so as long as that review meets the guidelines of whatever, whether it's Google or Yelp or Angie's List or whatever it is, if they are within the guidelines, the chances are that review is not coming down. I mean, it's very, very rare that that you'll be able to actually get a review removed. And so what I recommend is, first of all, I think you need to anticipate that there will be a negative review in your mix. I don't care how, the most perfect contractors that we work with inevitably get some negative review that more often than not is not about the service, right? It's about, somebody was on a webinar with a woman, female contractor, Amanda Godward from Michigan, and she got a negative review that was, there was a gas leak in the house that she walked into, and they, by their protocol, they immediately had their crew leave, and they told the homeowner to leave, and the person wrote a negative review about that. Or you get a review that is somebody who's cranky because they didn't get a return call in 24 hours. And so very often that's going to happen, and I think we just need to anticipate that it will. So the better solution to a single negative review is lots of positive reviews. It's just dilution, right? Now, here's the good news. The data says that when there is a kind of a mix of sort of good and bad, it actually looks more genuine to that person. So in some ways, a single negative review is not necessarily a bad thing. When you have, some of the examples I showed are kind of so uniformly positive, people look at that and say, this seems like it might be gamed. Somebody might have kind of gamed the system. So a little bit of color in there is not bad. One of the things that is not used often enough is the response mechanism. So when you get a negative review, I would encourage you 100% of the time to write some response to that. Even if you have to say, we fell down that day, but we've taken it to heart, and we've implemented a number of measures to change what happened or something like that. That shows, commitment. It shows engagement, and it's generally speaking a positive thing. And by the way, don't think of the response mechanism as 100% for negative reviews. I strongly encourage people to write a response to as many reviews as you feel like. If somebody came in and said they had a terrific experience, write a response that says, yeah, we did too. You know, it was fantastic working on your house and great to meet you, and we're really pleased that you're so happy. So I encourage that. One little hint about Google Plus is that companies, as long as you have a Google Plus page, can review other companies. So this isn't really well known, but you know it is. So it doesn't have to necessarily just be an individual. So if you for example, have a partner that you work with, or somebody else, or maybe you did work for the local library or some kind of municipal building or some kind of nonprofit, if that entity has a Google Plus page, that they can write a review as a business. So that's kind of nobody really knows that, and yet it's something that is is easily done.
So, Peter, our next question is about the Google Plus page and where to look to find your Google Plus page and the process of claiming it.
Yeah, so I think the easiest thing to do is to go to Google and do a search for your company name and Google Plus. And usually it's actually the plus sign. I think if you spell out plus, you should work as well. So that's typically a pretty easy way to do it. If you are inside of the Google Plus network, there's a variety of different categories, one of which is local. And so if you go to that local tab, which is kind of now a drop-down, and search for your company name and your location, you have to do both together. That'll tell you whether or not you have a page. And once you're on that page, you'll see in the kind of the lower right a little red button that says, is this your business, or manage this page. And so you click on that, and then what will happen is that Google will verify that you are you, right? They want to, it's kind of it's a bit of a pain to go through this process, but we're kind of glad that not anybody can go sign up for your page, right? So what happens is that Google sends you a postcard with a verification number in it. These days it's taking about a week, so it actually happens pretty quickly. And then once you get that verification number, you enter that in, and then you're kind of off to the races, and you can go do the things I talked about, which is add a description, get your categories in there. One thing I didn't say, and is very, very important, is the data. Well, I made the point about the data. The exactness of your name, address, and your phone number, those individual pieces, is very, very important to make sure that those are super accurate for, even to the point of if your company is sort of LLC versus not, you really want to have absolute consistency over what's called the NAP, right? The name, the address, and the phone number, because each one of those pieces is a separate piece of data in the eyes of the search engine. And no more important place to get that exactly right than in that Google Plus page, because of how distributed all that information gets. So again, I welcome, my contact information is here. It is 4 out of 8 of you who dive in to go work on this are going to find some glitch, some challenge, and I believe that I have faced them all, and I'm more than happy to take a phone call and just guide you through how to get it if you run into any trouble during that verification process.
Peter, we have a question about, or a comment and a question. It says, I have sent letters to past clients requesting reviews, but they have not responded. And the question is, do these review sites like Yelp, is it true that they don't allow solicited reviews? How do you handle developing or requesting reviews from customers and then having them end up on one of these directories?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so technically speaking, both and the hardest ones of all are Yelp and Google Plus, in that they have the filters that they have for trying to weed out false reviews are turned up very, very high. They're extremely sensitive. So even the most legitimate review that may just do one thing wrong in the eyes of whatever Yelp has decided their filter is, can get filtered, and so all the effort that you went through, that the customer went through to write it, is all for naught because that review gets filtered. And so this is frustrating, but there are a few things that are obvious triggers for the filters. One is the pace of your reviews. So if suddenly you go from no reviews to having 10 of them all at once, that's a trigger to the search engine that this is kind of a campaign. You went out there and you kind of really hustled it and made it happen. So even Google calls it velocity, right? The pace of reviews, the velocity of reviews wants to be as sort of steady state as it possibly can be. So that's the most important thing. If someone is if there's a way to find out that someone is already a regular reviewer in Yelp or a regular reviewer in Google, those people are more trusted, right, than if somebody who is brand new signs up, writes you a review on the same day. So that's not easy all the time, but what I recommend is trying to get into a process of asking all of your customers for feedback on how well you did in a private way. So, in other words, systematize as part of your routine after every job. People give you feedback. When you get some people we call raving fans, or some people we call them promoters. When you find someone who's really enthusiastic, ask those people to write a review, and then give them choice. Don't expect them to write more than one, but say, look, we'd love to have you write a review about your experience. If you use Google+, go here. If you use Yelp, go here. Use Angie's List, go here. Give them some choice, and that tends to randomize the process as it is. You're going to obviously have a ton of fall off. People are going to say, sure, I'll do it for you, and they won't get around to it. But some will do it, and if you do it that way, then I think it sort of levels out that possibility that you get a kind of a big spike. Technically speaking, Google and Yelp do not want you to request reviews, and so it's just infuriating that they would make them this important and yet put up these barriers to making it so hard for you to do it. Those are my thoughts. And again, this is a topic we've spent a ton of time on. We'll continue to spend a ton of time on. If I'll be writing about the review thing, and we're watching the whole filter concept really closely, just trying to make sure we know everything that tends to be an unforeseen trigger for causing something to get filtered. So, but really good question.
Thank you, Peter. We're just about out of time here, just a few seconds left to wrap up the webinar. I want to thank you, Peter, for really an excellent presentation, quite interesting, and I can see from our volume of questions that the attendees are listening to it all with great interest. Before we close, I just want to remind those on the call that Build It Green is hosting 2 sales training boot camps in January. The first is January 9th and 10th to be held in Elk Grove, California. The second, January 13th and 14th in San Ramon, California. These are 2-day sessions with Mike Rogers, who is a consultant on the home performance business operations and success tools, and it is a format in which attendees will be able to work directly with Mike on their business plans, their business ideas and strategies. So it's a really great opportunity. To find out more information, please call your Build It Green representative, and they can provide you with more details. These boot camps are free events. in early January. I'm sure you'll be hearing more details via e-blast from Build It Green. So thank you everyone for attending today. We're very happy to have this chance to hear from Peter Trost about Social Media 101, and hope you all have a great day and a very merry holiday season.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.